I'm very happy to have a young person from Bangladesh with us today in the Voice of the Young segment. Hello, everyone. Good to be back. Right now, we have with us Zaheer Abbas. Let's listen to him. Over to you, Zaheer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mathur, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's definitely a pleasure for me. To the audience, my name is Zaheer. I am currently a third year university student. I'm studying at the dual BA program between Sciences Po Paris and Columbia University in the city of New York. I'm a major in economics across both universities. So I've been doing economics for a very, very long time now. And in my own personal and professional capacity, I work at voluntarily at a organization back in Bangladesh called Youth Policy Forum. And that's really how I spend most of my time. Um, uh, Public policy is a very, very crucial part of my identity, I think. And it's been something that I've been very passionate about for the last few years. And as a result of that, that's really defined the way I've sort of approached my life and my aspirations for for the last few years and for the coming few years. It's very much been patterned on a certain sort of idea I have of public policy and applying it in Bangladesh. Um, yeah, I think that's really the best way to introduce me. Beyond that, I love writing. I really enjoy writing fiction. It really goes hand in hand with the passion for policy. I think because
Yeah, all
so
policies are fictional, right?
they're all fiction, they're all stories. So at the end of the day, my passion seemed to work really well with what I want to do with my life. Um, yeah, I think it's really interesting to look into why I wanted to do public policy. It actually stems down to 2018. So in 2018, we had these student protests in Bangladesh, and these were protests for road safety. And as a young person, especially then, I think I was 15 at the time, and I was very apathetic towards politics. I was brought up being told that politics is a very dirty game, and it really is something that no one should, be a part of. That was the sort of narrative that I was told ever since I was young. But that changed completely in 2018 because in 2018 you saw that huge contradiction because you saw all these young people sort of marching outside, campaigning for something that they believed in. And that was political as well. And from my vantage point and my privilege, managed to see that, how essential sort of the political process was for young Bangladeshis. If they wanted to achieve an end, they would have to be political as well. So around that time, I really began to see the necessity of my own participation in, politics and economics and public policy. And in that same breath, by 2020, and during COVID, I actually joined the Youth Policy Forum, where I've been serving now for 3 years, and it's been a phenomenal journey. I've worked very dutifully with my colleagues, and it's been a very inspiring sort of thrust into what it means to be participating politically or through policy in my country. And it's really pertinent now because it's Victory Day in Bangladesh. It was Victory Day just on the
So,
16th of December.
right.
So it's a very good reminder um, of what it means, I think, to be political in my country.
Okay, by political, you are not really joining a particular party or supporting a particular party. You mean
Yeah,
just being part of the political process.
precisely. And I think that was the fatal flaw in Bangladeshi politics for a very long time. It was the imposition that if you wanted to be political, you had to be a part of the party or any party, be it the government or the opposition. But what we've learned, especially as young people in Youth Policy Forum, is that that's not necessarily true. Citizenry, nonpartisan organizations all play a very crucial role in the policy process. I mean, I'd love to cite a very good example, which was, I think a year ago, where we launched a program called the Local Development Initiative through our youth organization. And what we did was we said that, we are a nonpartisan organization, but we firmly believe that citizens must get closer to their, parliamentarians. That was a big gap in Bangladesh. And what we did was we carried out field research for parliamentarians to create evidence that they could use to inform them of how their constituency is doing. The reason we thought that we needed to do this was because parliamentarians are part of a political party. So the information they collect is from their local party workers who might be biased. Effectively, by bringing in a non-partisan sort of push for evidence, we were able to produce new information that they'd never gotten before, directly from the citizens, sort of closing that gap that was there and creating a feedback loop. And I think that was a rewarding sort of way for us to understand that, okay, so there is a significant need for a sort of non-partisan entry in politics, because partisan politics in Bangladesh is very much hostile. Whether we like it or not, it is very hostile. But of course, I mean, that just goes on to show how remarkable it is when citizens sort of participate. We've
Okay.
faced all sorts of novel insights. Yeah.
The battling
Um,
begums, they used to be called. I guess
yes,
one
yes.
of them has been losing too much, so there's no longer a battle. But
Yeah,
as outsiders, we used to call it the battling begums.
I remember reading that headline a lot as a young person.
Yeah.
And again, it's interesting because that may have been a battle, but for a lot of us citizens, the battle was on an entirely different front line. If you went out and you asked the average Bangladeshi, say in the southern coast, what is your battle? They would not say it is this partisan battle. It is actually the battle against climate change.
Yeah.
How am I going to survive here for the next 10 years when my soil is being salinized? I'm not able to grow my crops to the same yield, or how every cyclone or every sea level rise is making it even more difficult. And there are now hundreds and hundreds of climate migrants entering Dhaka, the capital city, every year. In fact, every day, I should correct myself. Um, and then if you go on the other hand, say right now, and you speak to a local rickshaw puller and you ask him what is the battle you're facing, he will simply say, it's the battle of feeding my family because prices have risen so much. I'm no longer to be able to afford the same things I used to. So that's where we come in, I think, as a youth policy forum, is bringing these policy issues back in the main dialogue, because we believe firmly how, important it is to sort of find solutions. And the most beautiful thing is, I think, in Bangladesh, and I'm a student of economics, so I am very biased, but I think we have a remarkable legacy of Bangladeshi economists over time, throughout our history. Um, as you might already know of Dr. Yunus, who was a Nobel laureate, but even prior to that, we have had remarkable economists like Dr. Rehman Sobhan, um, Dr. Nurul Islam, who were essentially economists dating back to our liberation. And in fact, the whole idea of an independent Bangladesh stemmed from the fact that there were these economists who identified the economic discrimination that was taking place,
Uh,
formulating that into a problem, into a narrative. And now, generations later, you have all these young people, and they're wondering, what does economics even have to do with my country? But then they realize that's the beauty of it. Economics has had so much to do with the Bangladeshi sort of, nation over time in our fight against poverty, and even now in our fight to be a higher income country. So I think that's a big reason why I'm studying economics right now as well. I
well,
think it's very valuable.
yeah, Zahir, let me add something here.
Yeah,
I was
please.
thinking just a few days ago uh, that the liberation of Bangladesh was what I call as a mega policy change. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And it did pay off. Okay. So I calculated the ratio of per capita
Mhm.
income in Bangladesh and Pakistan starting 1972, so that there
Right.
is no confusion as to what is the data and the World Bank data.
Hmm.
And actually, the ratio of Bangladesh to Pakistan per capita income declines in the first 20 years. So Pakistan's getting ahead.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's paying off, okay? Because you were at that time, 1972, I think 78% of Pakistan, the former West Pakistan,
Hmm.
and it sank to something like 56%. Okay. But I forget the exact year, but after that, it started rising. And in the last 10 years, from today, 10 to 12 years, it's ahead.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what I'm saying is that the liberation, the mega policy, since you're talking public policy, I'm talking mega public policy. Okay,
Right.
not road traffic. I'm talking mega public policy, political policy,
Yeah.
paid off because today the TFR in Bangladesh is lower than in Pakistan. The GDP per capita is higher than in Pakistan, and the growth rate is also higher. So, and no IMF loan.
Yes.
Yes, they have applied for an IMF loan, but it is mostly a climate loan, not
Yeah.
a financial emergency loan. So yes, on that account, the mega political policy, public policy change has paid off, and the economy is on a much sounder grounds than it would have been. So yes,
Absolutely.
you're too young
Absolutely.
to know those times, but I was around. I was
No, that's
around.
a very well, no, you're very right. Although I think definitely there's a lot of credit to be given to sort of the stakeholders who are present, especially the year you are mentioning, because I believe the year is around 85, 86, closer to 1990s.
Yes.
I think one thing that I've always enjoyed about Bangladesh and public policy is even though by and large we tend to be a bit more cynical about the average government response to things, in many times the sort of government mechanisms in Bangladesh have been very agile to change. So, for example, and this is a very recent but very important theory, which suggests that the government knew when to take a step back and let other stakeholders take the space. So especially, around the period that you mentioned, the government did not have that many resources. It was still reeling from a lot of political instability. And hence, it was not able to provide last mile public service delivery or much public service delivery at all. Take, for example, education, healthcare. These were sort of tasks that the government was unable to provide. So what they did from the government was they said that, all right, we can't take this job. Let's take a step back. Let's let the NGOs fill in. And this sort of created such a push for these NGOs. And I speak personally as well because my grandfather, my late grandfather, was a part of the NGO sector in Bangladesh, and
What's his
sort of
name? What's his name?
Dr. Khaja Huda, Shamsul Huda.
Okay, I
Um,
don't know.
yeah,
Sorry.
he led the Association of Development Agencies back in 1990.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but what was remarkable was because you let these NGOs come, proliferate, and enjoy so much funding and freedom, they started to innovate. So we start seeing solutions like community healthcare workers. I was a field researcher 2 years ago, uh, and I noticed how effective community workers were because you had these volunteers who would be 20, 21. These were women as well, largely.
Mm,
And for a small stipend, they would go and cover countless, like 500 households
mm,
every day. And that would mean that they would get at least the first level of medical support. That was one brilliant sort of endeavor. Microfinance was another one where we were giving access to credit at a scale that I don't think anywhere else we've been able to achieve. And collectively, this sort of gave people public service access, even though the government wasn't able to do it. So that was one sort of success. And then the other success was with the economy, is because you had a lot
yeah,
of
Zaheer, we know these things. I want to
oh,
hear about.
sorry.
No, I
I'm a
want to.
big I'm a
But before
I'm,
you do that, let me tell you that yesterday I was with my father-in-law. He's 97 years old and a close friend of mine. Both
right.
of them personally knew Abid, the founder of BRAC.
Ah, yes, of
And we were
course.
talking about those days, 1974, when he formed BRAC. And
Yes.
I've been to BRAC University, and once you step in there, you say, oh my God, this is something else. But these are all old things. We want to hear from the young people, you know.
Of course, no, you're right.
Let's hear from you.
I have been very passionate about sort of Bangladesh economic and political history. I think there's a lot we've learned from it as young people, in fact, because truthfully speaking, especially now, I think what's really interesting for us as young is we're just coming of age. My generation is coming of age. We're now 18, 20. We're eligible to vote. And we're actually facing, say, the first elections as a generation. And if you picture the issues that were existent 10 years ago and the issues that were existent now, they're fundamentally different. Because now if you ask a young person in Bangladesh, what is your biggest fear? There's an enormous chance they would say climate change. It just remains on our plate. We don't know how we're supposed to face it. And the second issue they would say is, the sort of economic factor, particularly with industry. Bangladesh has succeeded and we've enjoyed so much growth for so long, especially because of our sort of garment sector. But what now? We don't know. That's a very big issue as young people. We don't know what's in store for us. Um, we're wondering, will we be upskilled? Will we enjoy the kind of success that India or China have in exploring different sectors? Will we have a rising startup sector? And the issue is we don't seem to know what's coming for us. On one hand, we have a huge agenda of sort of digital digital Bangladesh, which has been pursued by the government. But at the end of the day, the average young person, personally as a young person, I can say, I don't know how it's going to apply to me. And I think that is what it all boils down to. Because you have all these young graduates coming up, and we're wondering, where am I fitting in all of this? Where is my training program? Where do I even find it? There's still that gap that I think we're always trying to fulfill in Bangladesh. And that's just something that we will have to contend with for the coming years.
So can I say that you are optimistic but confused?
I am definitely optimistic but confused. Absolutely. That's the best way to describe me.
Okay.
And it's the best way to describe a lot of us, young people in Bangladesh.
But
We want to be optimistic.
Yeah, but it's many people are like that. You are not the only people
No,
like that, right?
absolutely. But I just wonder, we want to be optimistic because we've enjoyed a lot of success. There's been a lot of prosperity in the last 10 years. But how do we reconcile that success with what's going on around us? How do we reconcile the fact that we've enjoyed so much prosperity, but now we're faced with such a huge environmental threat? Or how do we reconcile the prosperity, but in the same breath, we're seeing that we're having to take sort of measures against inflation? So as much as we'd like to be optimistic, we are more confused because there is uncertainty in the road ahead. But that only means, and I really believe this. I say this to a lot of the young Bangladeshis I always meet. I always say that we're living in a very historic time, because I think we're at that turning point where young people will have to take on more responsibility than ever before. This is just, maybe it's again my optimism, but I believe that when you are this confused, when you have so many questions, when you're innately curious about what's coming for your future, you have to step forward and take charge. So I think in the coming, years, you will see so many young Bangladeshis ask these questions and want to take more responsibility. And I think that's important, especially in a country where the mean age of the parliamentarian is in the late 50s. It's in the late 50s, and yet the majority of the population will be 18 to 25.
Well,
How does that?
Look at the US. The two leading candidates are over 75 years old. So
Precisely.
don't
And
worry.
as someone who's studying in the US, I also ask, how are we supposed to be represented by someone who is 80 plus?
Yeah. Okay. So
I
you are
can't
not
reconcile.
okay. Enough of that. Let me hear from you how you got, you were interested, but how did you choose economics? How did you go to Paris? All these issues. Let's make it more
Yeah,
personal. Make it more personal.
absolutely. So I've always had the privilege of enjoying a very supportive family. I think that's definitely an enormous privilege. My mother and father have spoiled me, I think, as a child, because for them they said you can do anything you would like so long you put your mind into it. That was their only condition. You have to put your heart into it, and you have to do your best at whatever you want to do. Which is why I had a lot of freedom. So I managed to do a lot of exploration as a high schooler, as a middle schooler. And by the time I was in my 10th standard and I'd given my board exams, I told them that I wanted to go study abroad. And this is not study abroad for university. I wanted to go for high school. I wanted to study abroad, which is a huge shock. But once again, they said that if you can get accepted to this program, we're more than happy to send you there. And this program is the UWC program, the United World Colleges. So the UWC, there are 18 different campuses around the world. I was sent to the one in India. So I lived in Pune for 2 years, between 2019 to 2021. This was a very pivotal 2 years because we were all of a sudden given an education where you're sort of given a mission. you're said that this education you must use for peace and a sustainable future. And then you will ask, what is peace and a sustainable future? And then they would teach you that. They would teach you the meaning of these words. And you're given such a potent education that you're filled with optimism and confusion that you start to take with you for the rest of your life. And because I was in UWC, I was already exposed to so many unorthodox paths in life. So my next immediate wonder was, what do I want to do after my time here? I know for a fact, and I still believe this, I want to return to Bangladesh at some point. And I've spoken and I've given you so many lofty thoughts on the fact that the young people have to take charge, and I want to be a part of that process. So instinctively, I knew that whatever I was going to study had to be for the service of my country. And then, of course, I wonder what that service would be. So when I began my time, I was looking for school where I could study political science because I was so interested in policy and politics. Sciences Po struck up as a school above all others because all of a sudden there was this strange unknown school that had somehow graduated 4 of the 5 French presidents, 5 of the 8 presidents, 4 of the 5 prime ministers, some combination of that. And I was really interested and fascinated by it. And the fact that it had a curriculum solely for the social sciences was something I hadn't seen before. So, and I have to admit, I'm a bit biased about the French. I was brought up reading Asterix and Obelix comics and looking at Airbus
Comics.
Yes, absolutely. And
So
Airbus jet planes.
it's
This was
not quite a qualification.
It's not at all. But when they interviewed me, they asked me very seriously, why France? And all I could tell them was, frankly speaking, when I was a child, I would read these French comics and I would look at the French airplanes which would fly over the sky. And I knew that this must be a very good place to be. And they loved it. They thought this clearly is something. We might as well take him in. But I began my time in Sciences Po, and that was the best 2 years of my life, formatively and educationally, because for the first time I was given sort of a training to be a social scientist. I was given courses in law, in politics, in economics, in sociology, and I began to look at the world in all of these different ways. My day would start, and I would start learning about the first 20 fundamental articles of the Indian Constitution, the sort of super constitutional principles. And then by the time my day would end, I would be studying perhaps supply demand economics, like fundamental aggregate supply, Keynesian economics, and so on and so forth. And then the next day, they would say, okay, now we want you to study sociology. Let's look at Pierre Bourdieu's distinction. So being exposed to all this, especially when you want to work in the social sciences or in the service of society, was very brilliant. And we were given the opportunity to explore what it meant. I was very proud because in my second year, I managed to organize 2 events. The first event was a virtual event with Dr. Kamal Hussein, who wrote our Constitution. And it was just a discussion on constitution building and what it means to write one. And for the first time, these students in Sciences Po had a chance to ask directly from their syllabus, oh, I have these questions. And then the subsequent event was an ambassadors event where we invited 3 different ambassadors, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, to simply interact with each other and with the students. That's what it meant to be in Sciences Po. You're not only studying a social science education, you're being exposed to it firsthand. And I valued that a lot. And ultimately, I made the switch from political science to economics in Sciences Po. And I think this might be a very unpopular opinion, but it's how I made my mind up at the time, is I thought to myself that when you go back to your country, how would you want to help? And on one hand, I could take back home a political science degree, and on the other hand, an economics degree. And what I've always believed is that in my country, politics is the politics of putting rice on your plate and making sure people are fed and that they're prosperous at the end of the day. And I felt that if I want to be able to put rice on people's plates, if I want to keep them prosperous, I would want to study economics first. So I know what systems we can use, how we can actually lift people out of poverty. So I made the jump to economics, and I've carried it on now here in Colombia, which is an absolutely different intellectual environment, but definitely a very rewarding one. Because in Sciences Po, the economics was only the beginning of it. Now in Colombia, I'm ending that journey. I'm getting to explore economics in a much deeper level, which I found very rewarding and definitely encouraging me to go even further in this field.
Okay, so what's next for you?
That's where the confused part comes in and the optimism sort of dies away. I don't know, but I definitely am targeting a few things, and number one is a PhD in economics, because it's such a discipline. It's a science. It's an exact science, and I really want to be able to answer some of the burning questions that I have, questions that I haven't even formulated yet, but I know that are in the back of my mind, especially in the world we're in now. I have questions about, for example, climate finance, because we keep throwing these words around, but we don't seem to know what climate finance even means. For countries like ours, say Bangladesh or even India, what does the loss and damage fund mean? How does it work? No one's given us an answer yet, even though they've just pledged all this money to it. I want to find out what those answers mean, for example. So a PhD is definitely something that I'm greatly looking forward to. But it's my hope that with such a technical and advanced education, I'd be able to go back home and apply the training I get.
Okay, wonderful. It's been a real. Anything else you want to add?
No, not really. I mean, thank you again for the
I
exposure
mean,
and the
any
opportunity.
co-curricular activities? Anything you do for fun?
Well, as I mentioned, writing is really my biggest.
Okay.
I love writing stories. It's a very
Okay.
personal thing for me. So I
Yeah.
mean, in my free time, that's all I do is I
Okay.
write. But yeah,
All right. Wonderful. Thank you for being here and for telling
absolutely.
us exactly what you have gone through and what you want to do in the future, and being so clear and open to say that you are confused. But that's the state for many people at this age. And they change many people switch from engineering to economics or here and there. And so, it happens. No big deal. I'm just happy to have you here, and thank you very much. So let's see if we can catch up with you 1 year from now and see where you are and what you are doing. And in the meantime, let's say bye to the viewers and we end the
Thank you, everyone.
recording. So bye,
Absolutely.
everybody. I'll be back with another young person or an expert soon. Bye.